Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Be introducing Josh here, who's going to be adding +10 security to Scrum and Agile environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me give you a little background about myself. I started writing code when I was in middle school, just decompiling VB apps and making them work the way I wanted to. When I got into college, that's when I started to get into security, doing undergraduate research and cryptography and risk assessments. Now I work as an application developer for a state agency, and I've been doing Scrum for the past 2 years. So a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to kind of touch on the brief goals of security. I know we're all here for security, but just there's two main categories I want to point out. Then I'm going to give you a 10,000-foot overview of what Scrum is, define some general terms, not really going to be a definition dump. How does Scrum Agile benefit developers? What are the effects on business operations? If development teams and security teams work together and can't achieve their goals, what happens? The security negatives in a Scrum and Agile development, so there are things that might not actually work. So given our original goals, how do we actually apply those to Scrum, our security goals? And then I'll discuss the security development Scrum integration. So how do we start to integrate development and security together? Then finally, implementing Agile and just strictly Scrum teams. So the goals of security, we have two main high-level categories: prevention and training, and response and integration. Prevention and training, we have things like defining policies, procedures, help to secure an organization, protect day-to-day operations, finances, continuous education of general individuals, like what you shouldn't do. Monitoring the essentials, network tools, help to identify things, issues inside and outside the network, set up mechanisms to implement specific security policies, so your passphrases, your 2FAs, your access controls, and response and investigation, so responding to alarms, anomalies, well, this doesn't look right, or investigate things during research, or figuring out if something goes wrong. So those are two main categories. Now for the 10,000-foot overview of what Scrum Agile is. A basic definition would be Scrum is a way for small teams to break a large project into short, manageable goals, using 1 to 3 week sprints of time. Teams can measure their large project's progress toward completion. Teams can identify specific areas of improvement, positive outcomes, at the very end of each sprint. So basically, you're taking a large project and breaking it into small, tiny slivers. Some general terms. User stories. There's a short description for a specific task to get a desired outcome. So as X, I want Y, so that's Z. So as a user, I want to be able to log in and quickly print a client report, or as a user, as a remote user, I want to be able to VPN in and connect from home. Grooming, so defining the acceptance criteria and user stories of specific tasks. So what are the requirements? Sprint is a length of time to complete various tasks, 1 to 3 weeks. A Scrum Master is an individual who kind of oversees the project and guides the teams through the Scrum process and removes any blockers that if someone has an issue with a task to not being completed, this is the person that should help them do it. A product owner, that's the person that owns the product. A retrospective is a meeting run by the Scrum Master at the end of each sprint to kind of reflect and allow for discussion of what went well, what didn't go well, and focus on things that they can improve each week by week. And then finally, a demo or the demonstration. That's really how teams really demonstrate what they completed, the various tasks. So what are the benefits of Scrum Agile to developers? It helps them to focus on completing assigned tasks during a sprint. Short daily updates are given to complete, and individuals. Short daily updates are given in small little meetings by individuals about their specific tasks, just to recap either the previous day or what they intend to work on during the day, discuss any blockers or issues they might have or foresee to complete a specific task. There's measurable expectations of what they can accomplish on a specific task for a defined length of time. So when a task is accepted, it's already has an estimation how long you need to complete that task. After each sprint, the retrospectives are given to each team. Again, each team can identify things that went wrong. There's even a rolling record kept from previous sprints, so they can even continue to look back and see if a certain thing is going to be a problem. Requirements and acceptance criteria are clearly defined before each task is actually started. The acceptance criteria can even be adjusted as needed, but only if time allows on the task itself. This kind of limits scope creep of a particular item, so if a developer is adjusting the login page, you have a bit of a criteria, and you're not going to limit, it's not going to blow up to a huge project. You're able to consistently change focus. So since items are developed in small slivers, think of just layers of this large project, it's going to quicken development. Since your acceptance criteria is already set, the amount of time is already estimated, so you're not going to go beyond that. So what is the effect of business operations if development teams and security teams can't really achieve their goals? Because security teams need to protect their organizations, development teams need to improve, maybe even modify, or even develop new functionality. So I'll discuss the pros and cons of each group if they don't meet their goal. So let's talk about the pros. With security, if they do meet their goals, you're going to continue to protect, secure, and even protect internal operations, continue to prevent data loss, build on existing policies or improve policies, and build mechanisms to help protect business operations. So how do we decommission hardware, destroy documents, and even respond to incidents as they occur. With development, metrics are set. This will help establish end dates for business operations. You're going to maximize your development time. You're going to get the most out of your developers, more efficient use of a resource, better documentation, more feature-complete software, because you'll be able to groom and have proper acceptance criteria. So what are the effect on business? What are the cons? Since security is mostly reactive, you can't fully plan for some things. When new policies and mechanisms are implemented or created, sometimes the proper explanation of why something is happening or why something needs to be implemented isn't really explained to individuals. So individuals complain, they get frustrated, their daily routine is adjusted. and has become more complex. A lack of funding can sometimes provide inadequate security measures. Sometimes even a lack of knowledge is just a danger in itself to exposed systems. So if you don't secure an environment, you could lose data, interrupt business operations, and sometimes even bad press. With development, if projects aren't completed on time, funds could be depleted faster, future projects could be pushed back. Then the general lack of faith in development or developers can increase and can cause problems. So what are the negatives with security that could make it difficult to implement Scrum or Agile in an environment? Sometimes teams are limited to a set number of tasks during a sprint planning. So this doesn't account for emergencies, because we can't really provide an estimation of the scope of a malware infestation. So these scopes are unknown. User stories since user stories need to be very specific about what they need to do, sometimes you can't encapsulate that into many aspects of security. So as a product owner, I want to stop from getting hacked. That's a little too broad. So given our previous security goals, how do we apply those to Scrum? With prevention and training, those can be flushed out in grooming, so you can limit the scope of a specific task, and then figure out if it's proper policy and if it meets the definition of actually finished. At a retrospective, prevention and training could be analyzed by the whole team and figured out if things need to be improved further or if things are completely wrong. With response, establishing what you are doing during the sprint, so identifying things that might went wrong in the retrospective and how to fix it, and your demo could be just the process of your investigation. So how do we merge security and development teams and integrate them into an Agile Scrum environment? First, we want to start to integrate. Well, by integrating security and development, they can start by sitting in the same Scrum meetings. With security, you might want to target a specific development team. If there are multiple teams, you might want to focus on only one team at a time, or have other people in your security group attend other teams. Security teams might want to attend an Agile training to further understand the concept of Scrum and Agile, and then actively participate. Schedule meetings with developers to kind of teach them and explain them why something is beneficial, or meet with the product owner and the Scrum Master to add these to the backlog and then eventually get them groomed. Some security fixes might not be immediately within the scope of the current project, so they might not get fixed as quick as you want. Sometimes leaving idle capacity to allow developers to handle a crisis, or if issues need to be fixed but yet have not been groomed or acceptance criteria, or if it doesn't have acceptance criteria. Then on to some limitations. So if there are multiple development teams, I touched on this briefly, but there are a limited number of security teams, it could be difficult to focus on multiple teams. Security teams could spread themselves too thin. If new developers come on board and they finally understand what security means, there could be some developer onboarding that needs to happen, so you might have to start back all over again. There also could be a learning curve on the security side and development side. Just changing how you do things is sometimes kind of difficult if you've been doing it for so long. And sort of having a developer write better code, or again, changing their daily operations in general, or even learning Scrum, if you've been doing one thing day after day, might be kind of difficult. Then adding out-of-scope items to the backlog that are not within the current scope of the development teams might not get fixed, so that might be a frustrating point. So implementing Agile and Scrum and security teams, kind of going to give an example on that. So let's say we want to improve the current password authentication to an external website. Within the beginning, we might have various tasks to help get the project rolling. So the product owner will need to break down the current policy in a grooming session, start breaking things up into small slivers, and tasks will start coming out of that. So finding previous documentation, looking through code. If there's no documentation, someone with some technical knowledge might need to join the product owner. Figure out how well the policy is currently working, and if it really needs to be adjusted or defined. So maybe those are questions or tasks that could be answered. So next, we need to start building out our user stories after we start doing our research for this password authentication. And then also defining our acceptance criteria. So each user stories, we'll start breaking each part into various user stories. And so as we build out these user stories, we could get things like, as a non-technical user, I want to log in, or as a user, I need to increase complexity of the current password string by setting a minimum character length, or as a user, I should not be able to use the same password within the last 8 times, or as an admin, I may need a stronger password than traditional users. From each story, we'll continue to break that down into acceptance criteria. And then from here, we'll define our tasks more clearly. If a task can't be defined in at least a single sprint, then we need to try and figure out how to break a specific task down further. Because we want small slivers, and we want to start building, layering tasks on top into our large project. So this will also help us build our documentation if we previously did not have any. So as we're getting our user stories and our acceptance criteria, we'll be able to, this is how we create the documentation if it wasn't there. Some other tasks, the project might not even be finished once we complete our initial tasks, because we might need to go back and validate it. And even just validation against the current system. So this is kind of the umbrella of our current project that we took on. Some additional tasks, too, that you might consider. So we start to so again, I think I briefly said this, was we might need to audit the what we currently have, and then as we start to implement tasks and finish the project, we might need to go back and check, is it as strong as we initially thought? So just validating that. So then if we find any issues, those are more additional tasks on the current that are still within the scope of the current project, if they're not within the same and so we continue to build tasks on our current project, and employee training would also be another task to teach people and to build further documentation on how to use the new system that we're building. And even monitoring people not logging in properly as well because of it. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Thanks to Grant and B-Sides. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
What do you think about specific security user stories?
Like focusing, he asked, what do I think about specific security user stories? As long as you're pretty specific about what you're trying to accomplish, and because the example that I gave was redoing a website's password authentication. So you would have a lot of security-specific questions, or a lot of user stories in there that might need to be answered, or need to be handled in specific tasks. Does that kind of make sense?
So, quick question for you. As a product owner, I want to help my Scrum teams develop secure code quickly so that we can ship the product on time. How do you avoid sprint lag, like you get with developers to QA, where you find bugs in Sprint 2 that were developed in Sprint 1? Well, it seems like if the security team comes along and tests after QA, then you get security bugs in Sprint 3 for code that was developed in Sprint 1. The developers are already on to thinking about Sprint 4. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, so you said the developers start push everything out to QA, and then QA starts testing.
How do you avoid reinventing waterfall in a security perspective?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think that does go back to some education, and that is a lot of waterfall. If you're going back to previous sprints to fix things that developers have moved on, and sometimes if they didn't comment the code, they might not remember a specific problem. So I think having everything pretty close-knit might help resolve that. So instead of having a pause between developers' projects, they don't really move until they don't move on to the next project until everything's finished.
Hey, I was just going to respond, but wouldn't a better approach be start integrating your security tests into your unit functional testing, so you're getting the feedback at the time when the QA testing is actually happening?
That's also possible as well.
So my comment is, have you tried threat modeling as a kind of a way of kind of injecting those tasks in your...
Have I tried? I'm sorry, what?
Threat modeling or threat analysis.
I have not specifically.
Yeah, because I think that's the one way of kind of concretizing those tasks and then kind of focusing to the most important kind of items, whatever the system is.
That's a good point. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.